cool. Start the recording. And then make that big screen. Awesome. Okay, well, hi again, everyone. Been a couple weeks. So, um, yeah, it's been a couple weeks, so it's nice to finally like pick this book up again, even though my copy is like completely disheveled. Um, but we hadn't done, or we were on now chapters 5 and 6 of Bertrand Russell's outline to philosophy. And there's really like two kind of topics he wants to cover in these chapters. In the past chapters we talked a lot about like behaviorism and this like birth of psychology and like how we're measuring what people are thinking about, basically trying to like objectively measure what's going on inside of people's minds, or how psychology kind of was starting off at the point, all of their little experiments with the apes and the rats and all that type of stuff. But chapter 5 focuses in on the idea of perception, or more specifically like perception and our ability to objectively measure it, because we know that everyone perceives stuff, right? Like if I draw like a little smiley face on this post-it note, this really ugly smiley face, you're all perceiving it, but we're perceiving it from like a very subjective point of view. Um, and Russell here, he's trying to see if there's a way, if there's an angle that we can um, like verify almost that other people are perceiving. So like when you ask someone to pass you the mustard bottle or the ketchup bottle, and they pass you the right bottle, Russell's saying here that there's some sort of proof that they are perceiving the things, the mustard and ketchup bottle, in the same way that you're perceiving it, or at least understanding it. One of the first things he points out is that when we're talking about perceiving and perception, the term knowledge or knows gets thrown around quite liberally sometimes. And in the English language, this word knows means different things different times. Whereas in other languages like Spanish or French, there's more precise meanings, or German too. There's like more precise ways of explaining how we know stuff. You can say like you know of someone, or you know someone, or things like that. And it gets a little tricky. He just kind of wants to point that out. He makes this claim, or like he makes this like this point that perceiving is not the same thing as observing something. That simply like staring at something, staring at a picture, or staring at, let's say, like the clouds, it's not the same thing as perceiving an image in that picture, or perceiving the shape of that cloud. We can all look at a cloud, we can all observe that cloud, but all be perceiving a different image in that cloud. So it's like this equivocation between observing and perception that he wants to kind of dismantle. He says no, like let's break that tie a little bit. He goes on to say that the main difference between perception and other types of uh, instruments that are used for perception, things like thermometers, or things like I don't know, like temperature gauges or pressure gauges, or like scientific tools that are meant to measure things out in the real world. The difference between those instruments and our human capacities to measure things and to notice differences in like sound and brightness and all that type of stuff, it comes down to our conditioning, or our ability to be conditioned for certain reflexes. And in the past chapters, we kind of talked about this emergence of conditioning and conditioned responses in psychology, with like you can think of like Pavlov's dog, how they were being classically conditioned, or the Skinner box, where they were introducing operant conditioning. And so he's thinking that Russell's kind of saying that the main key component of perception is this, or the key component in perception for humans is this ability that we have to enact this this conditioned reflex or whatever. He kind of talks a little bit more about dreams and how there's associations that go on in dreams. Like you might hear sounds, and you might like make connections between like music and stuff like that, and that it's very different than the associations we make in waking life, because in waking life we try and like verify and prove things using reason. And as like redundant or simple as it might sound, I think what he's trying to put across is just saying that everything is not what it seems. Um, Perceiving stuff and seeing stuff are different things a little bit, or observing stuff, perceiving stuff, different things. Then he kind of pits knowledge against that, and He says that inference, that perception is also not only different from knowledge, not only different from observing, but it's also different from inference. So he uses this example of like when someone was looking out at the horizon or like the ocean, and then you see like a little black dot far away. Someone might say, "Oh, I see a ship," or "I'm perceiving a ship." Really, that person isn't perceiving a ship. They're perceiving a little minute dot out on the horizon, but they're inferring that it's a ship because in the past they've had experiences where they see that dot and it means there's a ship, and that's been like proven and verified. So this question comes up as to about like how we know we perceive, and how it's arrived to subjectively versus how we can know we perceive and then put an empirical twist on it or like some sort of objective measure on it. That was chapter 5, all about like perception and stuff like that. Kind of cool. I don't know, to me it was just like psychology stuff or like intro psychology stuff, but I still really like how he approached it from a philosophical angle a little more. Chapter 6, I wanted to read the first passage there because I thought it like explains what his like little project here pretty quickly, or like his thesis. I don't know what to call it. His like main point. He's saying, I do not fundamentally agree with this view, the view of behaviorism, being enough to explain this type of memory or knowledge. But I think it contains much more truth than most people suppose, and I regard it as desirable to develop the behaviorist method to the fullest possible extent. So he's kind of saying that if we're trying to explain or understand perception or memory, behaviorism is a good tool we can use, but he doesn't think it's an end-all be-all perfect explanation for this like this philosophical project. He makes a distinction between different types of memory. I don't know if he ever explicitly says it here, but in psychology, there's this idea of episodic versus procedural memories. There's types of memories or knowledge that we can say, like of how to ride a bicycle, right? It's like a type of bodily knowledge. It's hard to explain to someone in words how to ride a bicycle. But you know how to ride a bicycle and you remember how to ride a bicycle. It's very, very different, that type of knowledge, that type of procedural bodily knowledge, versus more explicit or declarative or like statement fact-based knowledge. Like if I asked you, when's your birthday? It's like, okay, well, it's, March 20th or something like that. Or what's the capital of Russia? Moscow. It's just like a fact. That type of memory is very, very different than procedural memory, how to write or how to ride a bike and so on. And the behaviorists at the time, they were trying to say, or they were basically saying that recollection was this verbal habit. When you are kind of demonstrating that you remembered something, you're just engaging in a type of like verbal habit. Like, I don't know how else to explain it very well, but he doesn't like this approach because he thinks that you can like recite things but not have understood them fully before. And if you didn't fully understand them before, then it's a bit of a weak claim to say that you're remembering this stuff properly. He says you can state words, memories, or you can state memories in words which you have never put into words before. So to say that a memory is a type of verbal rehearsal is a little bit brittle for Russell. And he comes up with like proofs where people who don't know how to speak yet, like really young babies, or people who just like, he says the example of like a kid who hasn't learned the word wrist but still hurt his wrist, is able to later on in life say, oh, it was my wrist that I hurt, even though he never knew of this word wrist. So there's this jump between the verbs and whatnot. And then he just kind of ends off by saying that behaviorism, or this way of understanding behaviorism, isn't everything when it comes to memory. There's like another aspect of memory. That's more or less what I understood or what I took from these chapters. Not much else, but I am very interested to hear what you guys thought of this, or what I missed, or in particular, or anyone else who read, like what kind of points I missed or just like brushed over.
Honestly, it sounded like you hit everything right on the mark to me. I honestly have a lot of disagreements here with Russell. Um, but I do like his point on the difference between perception and observation. Um, Obviously, we're perceiving a little splotch of, say, a little dot, right, from something out in the distance. Um, but it seems to sort of get objectified in so far, or for the perception almost seems just, obviously subjective. We're all standing in different spots and whatnot. And then we kind of put it into this objective format insofar as we say we're all observing sometimes similar things. We put it into this language format, and that allows us to communicate our perceptions a lot more precisely, even though we are definitely perceiving different angles, different things. Um, and language seems to become a tool there.
Yeah, I feel like language is almost like it's like a vessel to convey meaning, but it loses a little bit of the authenticity of like the thought. It's like this like cup, like it's like holding the water, but that's not what the water just like looks like in like the most holistic sense. Like water is just like non-shape. It takes the form of whatever vessel you put it in. And the same thing with meanings. Like when we say we see a ship or we see something like that, like we're putting like meaning into like these rigid, into these words, to these like little vessels, and then sending them over with our verbalness. Um, and something is lost there. There's
Yeah,
some amount of oomph that's lost when we put thoughts into words.
no, absolutely. But I think as much as I know, at least with philosophers, since ancient times, like words and language, they're not conveying exactly what's there, but we should attempt to, at the very least, get as close as possible, have as like a likeness with our sentences if we want to convey truth, right? We can't convey exactly what we see because that's asking our language to be the thing we're trying to talk about. And as long as we get as close as possible, it seems like a lot of people are okay calling that truth. Um, and yeah, discourse is definitely never going to give you an exact, exhaustive description. I'm hasty to say definition because I mean we can accept any definition, even if it's not exhaustive. But a description of something is never exhaustive. It would take an infinite amount of time to exhaustively describe something because there's a bunch of random little facts about things in the world, like how many atoms are part of my keyboard, or how far it is from Jupiter,
Yeah.
and stuff like that, right? So there's kind of this weird cutoff line where we all just kind of accept, yeah, you gave me a good description of what that thing is without giving me near an exhaustive description.
I'm trying to think if the like we're a human to have like infinite cognitive capacities and infinite deductive capacities. Could you fully convey the meaning to them of something? Probably not, because there's an infinite amount of relational information to any thing you're trying to explain. So unless you had an infinite amount of time on your hands, then you couldn't explain it. But I don't know,
But also, language. Sorry, go ahead.
like I'm just trying to think like of an example, like trying to convey the idea or the concept of like two plus two, or like any type of like simple math or like logical principle. Even though the words might not do convey the stuff perfectly, the person's brain can abstract it perfectly from those words. Like, can two people can I teach someone perfectly that two plus two is four, or like that understanding of like basic arithmetic with finite words? And it seems for like I want to say yes.
I think that within our mind, right, we're kind of accepting. of the intelligibility of things, and insofar as you can have understanding of something without having giving it a perfect description, right? I kind of understand what morality is, but the problem is finding an adequate definition, or sorry, description of what that is, that everyone agrees upon. I think most people that aren't philosophers agree, like, hey, this is moral and this isn't moral. Um, and then when we start trying to give a description, that's, non-example based, like a what is F, like in a Platonic dialogue,
Mhm.
that becomes pretty difficult. Even when you're talking to people who are supposed experts, right? And we grasp, we have understanding of what the things are, but that it language, because it's inherently temporal, and other factors, it's very, very tough um, to adequately describe something.
I want to add something there. I think the opposite can also be true. You might have a perfect description of something and not have a perfect understanding of that. For instance, I could tell you, let's say, I give you a perfect molecular model for water, but somehow you're not able to find out the emergent property that water is wet from that. So even if you have perfect information, you might still need to process it further than just only process it further to get some emergent properties from that.
That's a
So
good point, yeah.
not even if I give you a full description, you know everything.
So there's like this disconnect between um, language and our perceptions, that just, it's like a void that can't be filled, right? Um,
Right.
It's almost like raw
no matter,
facts, and understanding. It's like oil and water. Like they're not. It's not the same thing. There's something that's going on there.
all right, we try to mix them,
Yeah.
and so far as we're mixing them, we're losing something, whether it's on the perceptive side or the linguistic side. But no matter what, something will be lost. And maybe we can try to find a happy medium where they both lose the exact same amount. So it'll be as close as possible to each other, but it still will never be one and the same, because that's asking, say, the word um, bottle to be a bottle.
Yeah. I think like to what Giancarlo was saying. There's like a little passage. Where was it? Where he's talking about how a bad mathematician would understand something. Oh, here we go. So it's says again, if you're learning, say, a proof of a mathematical theorem, you do not learn by heart what the book says. So that's like this like fact description knowledge, unless you're a very bad mathematician. You learn, as people say, to understand the proof, and then you can reproduce it in symbols very, very different from the ones um, you originally like read in that book. So there is like you can get descriptive information of stuff, explain it in a completely different way, but you were never taught that completely different way of explaining it. It was like some sort of like mental gymnastic you were doing, some sort of like understanding or little hamster up there spinning around and then understanding the proof.
That little hamster goes. Yeah, that um sounds about right. I don't think that I've ever just read the book and understood it, no matter if it's a math book, a philosophy book, or just a random piece of literature. Um, there's always some seeming disconnect that needs to be accounted for.
And it's funny because like in schools or in tests, a lot of the time what they're testing is like this ability to memorize or like regurgitate stuff. Um, I think just totally misses the mental gymnastics aspect that you're trying to test. I'm really jealous of people who can do that though. Who like you ask them a definition and they can like verbatim spit it out, or they can like start citing lines or passages from texts, and there's this like feeling of like, oh, that's incredibly intelligent of them. Um, but I don't
Yeah, I
feel
wonder
like
how much of that is actually intelligence versus just memorization. Because
yeah,
I mean, when you study enough, like, yeah, you'll be able to spit it out because I mean, you've worked on flashcards for the last 48 hours to 1,000 hours.
yeah, it's hard to say like it. When would I be convinced that the person is combining like descriptive knowledge or like written down facts and cognitive abilities, cognitive flexibility, whatever you want to call it, versus just regurgitating the facts. It's hard for me to say like when I would say like, oh, you're just spitting out facts versus oh, you're actually using those facts to do some fun work. Maybe I lack the cognitive capacities to discern those two things. But I am jealous of people who can do that.
There's something I found I wanted to discuss also from chapter 5. I found really interesting that when Russell was trying to get knowledge of whether someone was perceiving something or not, um, he was going for practical certainty rather than for absolute truth. And somehow he also mentioned that 1 in 10,000 was enough certainty for at least for the mastered problem.
Yeah.
But I also I wanted to discuss in particular in some of the scenarios. I think he dismissed hard to quantify probability as uncertain. And I think we need to make a distinction between scenarios in which it's hard to think about what the probability is from uncertain scenarios. I think those are two different things.
Yeah, very good point. And I think we talked about that in maybe like the intro or like the first or something like along those lines in the intro or the first book club meeting. And it was like about yeah, like practical certainty, like you can be more or less sure, like reasonably sure that someone knows about something like he says like if they give you the number 2467 um but you can't have that absolute 100% certainty. Um and that sounds like a very skeptical thing to say or a very cynical like Humean thing to say. I'm sympathetic to that.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it Humean. Um, but I do think that we do see cases like that all the time. And it's interesting how a lot of philosophers make that distinction. This idea between practical knowledge versus theoretical knowledge, right? That you see as early as Aristotle. Um, and it's like there's something in like going back to what we were saying, like there's something in understanding that just can't be captured by theory, language, right? Because doing, how do I say this? Like doing something is a lot easier for us to grasp, right? Because we don't need to learn to do, just to do in general, right? I think that's kind of innate within us. A baby just kind of already knows how to do specific things, knows how to move its body and whatnot. But everybody needs to learn language, and when you're um using syntax wrong, when you're using the wrong word, like there's a kind of learning no matter what with theory. Um, but doing is innate, and so I know maybe something like that has something to do with it.
I get what you're saying. Doing and learning. But I feel like with the example with speech, someone who's never gone like a kid who like grows up, never goes to school, is never taught grammar, never taught to read or write, he will still naturally without knowing it or not, be picking up on syntactic rules and like rules of grammar and stuff like that, just without explicitly being taught it or knowing it. Because we just have this
Yeah,
predisposition, it's like reflexive.
but we know things through like we learn things through observation, even if it wasn't taught to us directly. I guess.
That reminds me, have you seen there's this Netflix documentary called Babies,
I think
and
so.
there's this episode. There's this episode in which they are shown a puppet show, and they see what appears to be a floating box defying the laws of gravity. And the babies, 3 months old, show larger attention span when they see something apparently unphysical.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very cool. That whole field of like developmental psychology, it's pretty fascinating. And yeah, and like it's super interesting, especially like before babies can even talk. Like before they can say, yes, that makes sense, and that makes sense. We have these like funny tools. It's just like how much eye contact they keep with the thing. And there was the floating box one with
Yeah.
which was interesting, or the theory of mind one. So like where there's two little puppets, one of them puts a toy in a box, turns away, walks away. The other puppet comes in, takes that toy out of the box, and the other puppet comes back into the scene. And then at a certain point, babies will understand that one of the puppets has information that the other puppet doesn't have, and then we'll be like really confused, or he'll understand that this person has the ball and like hid it somewhere or something like that. So like this ability to like think that other people are their own agents and have their own thoughts and beliefs is like a super interesting milestone for babies. That and like a lot of other stuff. Yeah, it was a cool documentary.
I have one question because does knowledge? I mean, what we mean for knowledge is someone assigning true or false to several assertions. Is knowledge a collection of assertions? Is knowledge a binary representation of assertions, or can we do a more complete model of what knowledge is considering uncertainties? I mean, can someone say, I think this is true, I think this is false, but does this knowledge model need to be binary?
I've always thought that, like, while they're related for sure, I'm hesitant to say truth and falsehood have much more to do with knowledge than we like originally think, because um I can tell you a truth 100% that, or something that is true, without me knowing why it's true whatsoever. And knowledge seems a lot more to be like the understanding portion, where like to understand why this is so, and if I can't speak truly about something, that doesn't seem to negate the ability for knowledge, right? If I'm not giving this adequate description, it doesn't mean I don't have knowledge of something. It just means I can't put it into perfect words.
Okay, that's a fine point. So you mean not only saying this is true, this is false, but also building connections between. I mean, not only knowing that this is true, but also having an explanation for that.
No, actually, precisely the opposite. Even if I don't have an explanation, I can still have knowledge of something. Like, have you ever seen, or think of this person who's like a master at their craft, who is an amazing, say, a blacksmith. Definitely has knowledge of everything that they're doing, but if you ask them to give their process like perfectly, I guarantee you the person who's receiving that information isn't going to be nearly as good at that thing without that. So they're not saying anything particularly false, and they're giving a description of their process, but they're not passing down that knowledge. If somebody tried to teach me how to blacksmith through, um, follow these steps on this piece of paper, I'm gonna burn myself a million times.
Not if the
Right.
steps were
Yeah.
exhaustive.
So this is a distinction between factual and procedural knowledge that you said, right?
Yeah. I'm inclined to say that you could still be taught how to blacksmith with purely you could be. Ooh, that's a good question. Can you be taught procedural knowledge only through information or just like through facts? That makes me think of like the Mary's thought experiment. Like, can you learn about riding a bicycle or learn about the color red? Something that's or not actually that's a little bit
Yeah,
tangential.
phenomenological facts. Yeah,
Yeah, like a phenomenological
versus
fact versus a that's tangential to like procedural stuff, but you can still use that train of thought with procedural thought. Like if someone were to give me an absolute let's imagine I don't get tired, I have all the time in the world, I can concentrate for a really long time. Could someone write out a list of like super detailed step by step things for me to blacksmith to like make a sword or build a hammer or something like that, and then me fully be
Like
able to.
Cortázar's book. Sorry,
Sorry, go for it.
like Cortázar's book on how to walk through a staircase.
I'm not familiar.
Julio Cortázar has a very detailed poem or book detailing how to walk through a staircase, like minutia by minutia step.
Interesting. What's the name of that? Or Julio qué? Julio what?
Julio Cortázar, ¿cómo subir una escalera?
¿Cómo subir Julio Cortázar? Never read it. Is it
Sorry, I
Spanish? Are
didn't
you
mean to
Spanish?
interrupt. I'm Peruvian.
Oh, cool.
I live in Spain.
That's awesome. Sweet escalera. You have really good English, by the way. I'm always surprised. Like I could never, or at least I think I would have a really hard time communicating philosophy or any type of like advanced, like abstract thoughts in a second language or like in another language. So I'm always super impressed when people are able to like articulate themselves. But yeah, so what do you guys think? Can you learn something through? Can procedural knowledge be taught descriptively?
I mean, yes, but also no. Like it'll be definitely not nearly as adequate, right? I think that's why we watch videos rather than read a book when we're trying to learn something. Um, when you wanna say learn to hang up a TV, you don't the directions on it um that came with the box, like they have images on it
Mm-hmm.
to show you where things go. It's not just step one, step two, with no images. And sometimes, if the images aren't enough, you look up a video. And maybe that's because you can relate to the other person's more, um, and step by step. And I don't know. I think you can learn, but it's very partial as opposed to images and videos.
Yeah, I think there may be a missing phenomenological component. Like if I said, imagine a dot that is precisely 1 inch away from another dot on a white post-it note or on a yellow post-it note. That seems to be different than me just showing you this. Um, why does that seem different? What's the missing thing? It seems to just be like a phenomenological one. Like when you see a picture or a video, it's a type of impression, that words alone can't convey. But then again, there's that saying like a picture means 1,000 words. So maybe just if you used enough words, you'd be able to convey that same impression or that same feeling. Like, could
It's
you?
also a matter of if you're looking at a picture or at a video, you can choose what to abstract at any given point. So, for instance, let's say you want to learn how to make an ollie in skateboarding through just sheer instructions. Can you ask ChatGPT to teach you how to do an ollie in a skateboard? Or is it easier to watch a video and see the small details of how the muscles of the person move? So can this be described easily if you make the right questions?
It might just be
Um,
a. Oh, sorry, go for it.
I used to skateboard, and I can tell you 100%, even videos don't do it justice. Like, videos help, but up until you do it thousands of times, it's not gonna work. You have to, like, you use the videos as um something that helps, but not something that teaches you to know how to do it. It's something that, like videos are just a kind of a reference. Um and I'm sure that goes similar for any what are we calling them, procedures. Um I think that goes similarly for anything that's as difficult as learning to skateboard, or other things, right? Like, doing an ollie is arguably the easiest trick in skateboarding, and it still isn't going to be done in under a day. No matter how many videos you watch, it's difficult. And maybe with skateboarding, another thing is, like, you can't. It's hard to get over that mental block of not, like, being afraid to fall and whatnot. So maybe we have to account that. But say we had somebody who wasn't afraid to fall whatsoever. Um, because even a small fall on an ollie can twist your ankle or, like, break a wrist. So people are, like, scared to do that. But no matter how many videos you watch, you're not going to learn to ollie until you try and try and try and try.
I I'm inclined like I agree with you, but I feel like a pushback you could have there would be in saying that it's like we could learn how to ollie through just facts and stuff, but it just happens to be the case that we have really limited attention spans and we have limited working memory and how much stuff we can store in our mind. So at a certain point, like, it doesn't matter how many more videos you watch, you're like exhausted in that capacity. Because if it's something like a lot more simple than an ollie, let's say it's how to break an egg or drop an egg. I feel like you could learn or say you know how to drop an egg or break an egg just through descriptions. But it's that, like, we have like such limited cognitive capacities that were we to learn a complex or a more complicated procedure like an ollie, that faculty of like reasoning and like technical, like word by word understanding, it wouldn't cut it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a given almost that the more complex a procedure is, the more, like, the bigger the divide is. But even something really simple, I saw this video recently of a teacher asking her, I think it was first graders or kindergartners, to make instructions to make a PB&J. Every single one of those instructions failed. Um, because, I mean, you need to be more specific if you want to just facts teach you. You need to be very, very specific. They're not thinking of the bag that the bread comes in. They're not thinking of a knife that you need to use to spread, because those are kind of just things that they assume were given.
Mm-hmm.
Um, right. And I think adults would make the same mistake, to be honest with you, because
So is this a
you're
practical
not
fault
taking.
or a theoretical fault? Like, could it theoretically be explained, but we're just really bad at explaining stuff?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Like if you were incredibly meticulous and you were just like you tried to capture every little detail about that bag of bread and the peanut butter and the spreading, could you give adequate uh explanations to how to make a PPJ? Or is it just
I'm
something that's
sure you
impossible?
could. I'm sure you could only because the person who's learning to make the PB&J has preconceived notions with peanut butter, with jelly, and with bread, even if they've never made a PB&J by themselves.
So let's say let's come up with like a thought experiment. Imagine, for one reason or another, a someone from like an Amazonian tribe who's never encountered knives or peanut butter or bread or anything like that. They speak English as well, or your same language. Would you not be able to convey how to make a peanut butter jelly sandwich to them? Or would it be because, or would you just kind of like sidestep and say, well, they have conceptions of like what food is or what spreading is, and then that's how they would get to know that stuff?
Honestly, I don't really have I
Well,
don't have an answer for you.
a lot of parents do this exercise, and well, this one I think it's perfectly possible, but of course you can be very try to find every loophole in their instructions just as a game. I mean, this is a very nice exercise to try to put stuff into words. But eventually they reach a reasonable explanation, a reasonable uh, set of instructions.
Mm-hmm.
At least this, yes.
It's practically useful, or it's like practical.
But there's this whole thing about muscle memory, which makes it very hard to put into words. So at least, I mean, you can put bread in. Okay, maybe there's some angles that you're assuming in how to put bread. For instance, bread only has one slice of bread. Practically has only 6 sides. So that makes it easy to describe. Um, but yeah, in general, if you wanted to explain how to make an ollie and be very detailed about it, you would need to say what angle to put your elbows in and everything.
I'm not so sure that you need to. I'm not so sure that specific, like overly specific instructions help. I'm thinking, and this might go against everything that we've just been saying, but with some procedures, like if I told somebody that, hey, you need to have your elbows at 45 degrees,
Yeah,
they'll be very, very, very worried about having that specific angle,
mhm.
that it won't help them with teaching. I think you need to pick and choose what you want to be specific about. Um, and there are some things that you can kind of just not worry about too much. Um, like with the blacksmith example, they don't need to tell me how to step by step walk to the crucible. You know what I mean? They just got to be like, okay, now head over to the crucible. They don't need to exhaustively describe 1 foot forward, 1 foot forward, 1 foot forward. Um, and so sometimes maybe like descriptions about procedures don't need exhaustive descriptions and in very specific descriptions.
Yeah, I'm starting to think now that like this muscle memory you talk about, it's just of a it well like it might to some like you can make some arguments that it's like at the reflexive level, like at the spinal cord level and stuff like that. But really, when we're saying like muscle memory, it's particular associations in the brain, in the motor cortex or the cerebellum. And I think these types of memories or these types of knowledges, they're just of a different nature, of a different genus, um, or they could be just of a different nature than like factual things that they just can't. It's like you can't explain or teach these procedural things through purely definitions or like facts. Like an ollie, no matter how many times or how beautifully you try and like explain it, or how many paintings you put in front of a person, there is that just like ineffable muscle body relationship that's happening or being like learned or being imprinted that you just can't mimic with words or definitions.
It's definitely possible. Hate to cut it short, but I have to go. But it was a great
Yeah, you're good.
book club. 3 weeks later, right?
we're moving a little bit slow with this one.
It's all right. All right, man. I'll see you next time.
All right, bye. I'll see you. I mean, yeah, like that's all I had to talk about for this book club. Is there anything else that struck you from this book or from these chapters? Because if not, I might
I'm
just.
checking my notes.
Oh, sorry, go for it.
I'm checking my notes I wrote a few notes to see if there's anything interesting to discuss.
That's awesome. You get bonus points, extra marks for bringing notes and questions.
So I was very interested in the relation between probability and knowledge and certainty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because on our day-to-day basis, when we assume stuff, or I think this is happening, I think this person thinks this, I think this person passed me the mustard because I said it, we are doing assumptions of probability. We're saying this is very likely, this is very probable, so I'm going to assume this is true. I'm going to assume this person passed me the mustard because I said it. I'm going to assume, since I said 2, 4, 6, 7, this person marked that very number.
Yeah. No, that's like a super huge topic in philosophy. That's like induction 101 or like probability 101. It's like saying like if I were to throw this or like drop this cup, I know it will shatter versus it's just very very likely that it'll shatter. But saying it's very very likely that it'll shatter is like a lot more words, so I'm just going to say oh I know for like practical reasons. And that's a good question. People have
But
different intuitions about
I
that.
found it, and I found it really interesting that in the beginning I thought that a knowledge model was just, let's say, true, false. Let's say assigning true, false for statements.
Mhm.
But from what we discussed, that's not just the only type of knowledge. I think that's very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to put
Okay,
into.
that's it for me.
Yeah, that's it.
Sorry. Sorry, what are you saying?
No, I was just gonna say like yeah, like it's very hard to assign like a true or false value when it comes to like riding a bicycle or swimming or something. It's like how can saying that oh my muscles moving in this way is true or false? It's like it doesn't have that aspect to it. I'll think about that. Yeah, I don't really have anything else to say. Maybe a tiny bit of a shorter book club, but I guess next time we'll do chapters 7 and 8, inference as habit, and behaviorist knowledge. Is that? Yeah, just up to, and then we can start part 2. That's awesome. Cool. Yeah. So we'll just do the next 2 chapters. Hopefully you guys can make it. Um, and then I'll end the recording there. But yeah, thanks so much for showing up. It's fun. I'm excited to keep going at these book club stuff. It keeps me entertained, keeps me busy, keeps me like engaged with Phil, even though I'm not really in school anymore. But yeah, it's fun to hear what you guys think.
Yeah. Cheers for that. That was great. I didn't really chime in. I've just been playing Counter-Strike while having you guys as like a live podcast, but that was really good.
That's awesome. Yeah, glad you can make it. Glad you listen in.
Yeah, no, it was great. I enjoyed the talk a lot.
Okay, sweet. I'm gonna log
Right.
off and end the recording. I'll catch you guys next week or just like in the Discord or something.